Right, hello everyone. Well, while we wait for everyone to get mic'd up, it's my pleasure to be here with you today to talk more about AI agents. So as Sam mentioned, my name is Fay Lin, and I am Senior Editor Technology at GEN, or Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News. We're a long-standing publication that's been covering the industry for approaching 45 years now, targeting specifically scientific audiences and for me particularly diving into the impact of AI in life sciences. So very excited to have a great lineup today. We got a taste of AI agents in this breakout already, some returning speakers, but very excited to have a robust discussion with this group and dive deeper into what agents mean for genetic agency. So to start, I see everyone has mics now, great. Or are we missing?
I'm all set.
Oh, perfect. So why don't we start with some quick introductions and what are the types of agents that you work on and what you focus on.
Okay, I can start, yeah. Look, again, from Stanford, Pathology and Genetics, we focus on building agents for genomics, and we're also very interested in how agents can be connected to embodied AI for automation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elahe. I'm a research scientist at Google DeepMind, and I'm specifically working on the AI co-scientist project, which is a general purpose multi-agent system for any scientific discovery.
Hi, I'm David Levy-Booth. I work on the engineering team at Dyno Therapeutics, and my team is building agents for orchestrating workflows, for organizing information, and for reasoning about protein design.
Andrew Giessel just talked about what we're working on, yeah, I'm focused on building systems for new types of strategic work.
Great, fantastic. So agents are impacting the entire pipeline from discovery to the clinic. So let's start by talking about the molecular treatments, more the discovery phase. And David, maybe I'll start with you to talk about some of the exciting agents that Eric announced this morning, from structure, workflow to knowledge.
Right, so I have the opportunity today to announce an open demo of our newest agent called P0, kind of a riff off V0, if you've ever heard of Vercel. And what it does is it's essentially, it's an LLM that's strapped to a structure viewer. Not that sexy yet, but what it's doing is combining that with some RAG capabilities and so the ability to use text prompts to change and interact with the structure. It allows our scientists to reason about structure, about proteins, and very clearly next step, let's call it P1, is going to be embedding design capabilities, the ability to change and refold and make new proteins within this interface. So that's the thing I get to announce, and we're going to have a roundtable where I get to demo it to you all. And what we're thinking of is how to organize our information. We have fantastic scientists at Dyno, how to organize their insights into this system to be able to provide our insights to you as you embark on your protein design journey.
Great, so we're very excited about agents and the capabilities. In thinking about some of the key gaps that the panel would pull out in terms of where there still needs to be work, particularly in the discovery phase. Maybe I'll put that to the panel, focusing on molecular treatments. Where are key gaps that agents can still fill?
Well, for us, a lot of the time we have, the tools are coming online, the models that we've heard about today. One of the constraints that I'm thinking about a lot is how do you use them really, really well so that your design will be effective? And that's one place I think agents and some of the capabilities around them, like providing guardrails, providing information to users, is going to help us get closer to those undruggable targets.
Great. So I suppose expanding beyond the discovery phase, we have a lot of talk about, Lei mentioned robotics and also downstream protocols and et cetera. Elahe, Andrew, Lei, I'll pass the mic to you to talk more about some of the more downstream agents.
Well, I can quickly start maybe. I do think that as Andrew and I think also familiar with the work on co-scientists is that how do we take, I think, different type of data and do reasonings and discovery, brainstorming. I think that seems to be still, it's very fitting for agents like Andrew mentioned, but I think it's still, there seems to be still a lot of work needed because a lot of times these models have context window limits, right? So we can do retrieval, RAG and stuff, but I think there's a lot, challenges on like hallucinations, right? Huge amount of data lake. How do you, work on top of these? I think these are one obvious sort of thing that can be spanning home, from even molecular design. But I think we have been finding that is a bottleneck, for example, for driving workflows in lab and probably later, even in the later stage, as Fay mentioned. Yeah.
I'll just say that, I think agents are really a different way of using a computer and designing the tools like in P0. In some cases, it's pretty obvious what tools might be useful. In other cases, I don't think that is entirely obvious. And so it's a kind of a different way of building these systems. Like, what is a tool? How should it be described? What parameters of the tool should be exposed to the user? How do you, the LLMs there are multimodal LLMs, but typically it's mostly text. So are some of the, say you have a tool that designs a certain sort of sequence, would you return the entire sequence if it's very, very long and expect the LLM to be able to work with it in very high precision? Or would you, factor that out into a different sort of tool that took a reference to that sequence and did something else that was a little more prescribed? So where to give the models agency and where to actually define carefully your own sort of algorithms and structures, I think is still a really interesting and exciting design space. I'm sure that's true for the AI co-scientist work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, all of you. I'm gonna add on top of this that that's correct, that we really need to invest more on tool use and defining and enabling more tools to the LLM. The more we do that, the more the powerful is our system. But one important thing that we should consider is the evaluation of these systems, because the more you add more agents, more tools, more data to these systems, the more you can get lots of errors at each step, and then you can get something that is not make sense after doing multiple rounds of steps from different tool calls. So the way that we evaluate each of them and focus on each tool to make sure that it is working and it is giving us the results that we really hope for, and then actually connect them in a very artful way, it's something that is missing right now, and yeah.
Evaluation is incredibly difficult. I think about the stuff we're doing, like, how do you know if it did a good job of defining your market size, right? Or how do you know it found all the papers that it was supposed to find? The power of it is that it can produce artifacts that are, have qualitative aspects to them, but it can be very difficult to score that or reference it for hallucinations or other sorts of issues. Yeah.
One of the challenges I frequently butt my head against is the stochasticity of the outputs of these models, even with very low temperature, just how they're designed, how they run, sharded across multiple GPUs. It can be really tricky when you do start to nail something down. How do you have that consistent output over time? And to be honest, I don't have a great answer for that.
So in thinking more about, we have a community here who's eager to use these AI agents and get their hands on these tools. In thinking about these evaluations, beta testers, et cetera, how can we as a community know where to access these tools? I know Dyno is just is announced a call for beta testers for their AI agents. How are we going to think about, as a community, using tools and doing that evaluation as a group to push the field forward?
Maybe I can start for AI co-scientists. Yes, actually, having a human in the loop for evaluating these systems is a necessary thing, and I don't think we will never gonna get rid of human in the loop for these agents, and we always need them for evaluation and validating the results. And for AI co-scientists, we had a trusted tester program earlier this year to give early access to some scientists and some universities to test out the system and give us feedback to improve the outputs or to add more tools, more data set to the system. And I should tell you that in early 2026, we are going to give it as a product to all researchers, the Co-Scientist 2.0, and then everybody has access to it, and we would really invite everyone to give us feedback and let us know that what is the gaps and what we need to add to the system to improve it.
Yeah, I think shared similar thoughts that usage by real experts, I think especially I think in biomedical field, because public data is generally speaking not necessarily as abundant as if we evaluate cooking recipes, right? I think having experts in the field testing and evaluating, like Andrew and David mentioned, is key. And I do want to add that I think for certain aspects of the agentic work, I think it would be interesting to see how much we can leverage internal data. But this is maybe more from a, say for us, it's more a small research group, but I think probably make a lot more, power to use Dyno or, a pharma company or Google. I think that could still be maybe squeeze more value from our existing data lake. And then the final thought is, I do think that, I think maybe the LLM model is going to, need to be more multimodality. I do think that, text is pretty good, but I do think there are a lot more multimodality we still want, right, from these.
Can I jump in on that?
Please.
So as we're talking about AI agents, just quickly defining it, we're typically talking about a language model that's able to interact with the real world through calling tools. Now, tools are typically small chunks of software, it could be a computer program, and these tools typically have a structured output. So you can usually tell, is this output correct? When you're calling many tools through a pipeline, that's when things start to get dicey. Did it do it in the right order? Does this make sense? And that's where having both our machine evals, our agentic evals, and then human in the loop makes a ton of sense for making sure these are actually not crap. So what we're looking for are people to kind of start interfacing with them, using them, tell us, does this make sense for you in your work? And one of the next steps that I'd really like to explore is exactly what Liz is saying, is to get away from the chat box. I'm really interested in things like voice and other ways that we start interacting with these agents and tools.
So we're thinking a lot about how these agents are in many ways automating, potentially replacing the human in the design space or the overall life sciences space. What are some key areas in which agents have really taken that leap to really automate key aspects of the therapeutic pipeline? Are there specific case points? And if not, where are we looking to for those differences to be made?
I can start and think of two. One is in writing software. The models and the sort of specialized development environments like Cursor or even VS Code are an incredible accelerant. And what is remarkable is you might think that they might be most useful for junior programmers, and they are, but for senior programmers that really know how to use the tools, they are incredible. Like order magnitude plus speed-ups in many tasks. I think the other that I've personally experienced is in understanding and rapidly reading literature. Like loading a paper in and basically being able to get a guided explanation of the parts of the paper that you don't quite completely understand is super, super fast. And that's only going to snowball as these systems are able to do that at more scale, pull in data from other places, and that sort of, getting up to speed in a new field or looking in another field for new connections, that I think is already well on its way to impacting science.
I can add on top of the evaluation, the thing that I really love about these agents is that they can really go and deep verify your findings and find any gap that no human can find it, because we don't have access to all the literature and we cannot understand everything that existing out there. But if you give your finding to these agents and they do multiple types of deep verification among themselves, they really can give you a good critical review of your paper. The other thing is the planner, because that's correct that we have so many tools, we have lots of data that we can use to get some optimum results for our specific task in mind. But the way that we plan to call them and to build on top of them, that if you give this autonomy to an agent and tell it you have these tools, you have these data sets, and you need to do this task for me, the way that these agents can plan and select the step of their execution is really amazing, and I think it's something that can be automated and can be trusted today.
And earlier this year, my group had released an agent that can run computational workflows. It can find when it has to make decisions, what do I do, step A or step B, and it can just run it. And the idea wasn't, I want to take someone's job. I want to reduce the amount of bullshit in someone's job so they can focus on the creative, the parts of the job that the human needs to do.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time writing code, and I think this is one of the places where this technology is most advanced, and so there are a lot of interesting sort of UX patterns and UI patterns, and even sort of, paradigms. Like, often you can program at a very high level, or you can ask them to read a code base and make a plan for you, and then you can, have them execute pieces of that plan in pieces, and you can interject at different points. All this sort of stuff is applicable in the science domain as well, but far less explored. And so if you are a computational person, I think you have a good opportunity to start exploring the edge of what it's going to be like to do work, and that includes work in the life sciences.
Great, I'll ask one more question before we potentially open up to some audience questions. So the theme of the conference today is genetic agency. Where do you all see agents falling into this mission of achieving genetic agency?
So one example, we definitely believe that if we needed to, similar to what Andrew and Andrew mentioned, if we needed to, for example, take in a custom VCF file, right, a mutation, from a patient, and custom design things based on that specific thing and scale that process informatically, agents would be a great place, because it's a bioinformatics pipeline. Human needs to do a little bit of tweak, but AI can do it like within seconds, hopefully. Yeah.
From my point of view, we may have a very long way to get there, but if we can have a virtual cell as a virtual lab to let the agent to test its hypotheses and whatever it is coming out for drug discovery, or for saying how this hypothesis can affect a cell, then we can close the loop and have an agent that can go from hypothesis testing to data analysis to actually testing it in a virtual cell, and then doing it millions of times and accelerate the drug discovery pipeline way more than what we have right now.
Yeah, in building agents over the last year, I've worked very closely with our CEO, Eric Helsick, and what he was insistent on, which I didn't get at first, but I kind of love, was this idea of an AI saint. This agent doesn't have feelings, but that we can somehow imbue with the drive, the mission to cure genetic disease. And I really love that mission, and it guides the work that we do with agents.
I think I'll just second the notion of closing the loop. typically now tools that agents use are self-contained sort of pieces of traditional software, but that could very well initiate experiments in a lab that a robot can do, and then those results can be automatically made available. And I think once you do that and can kind of build, it's very challenging to do, especially with the diversity of experiments that you have to do. Like, you may not need to do one experiment over and over again. So getting to the point where models can interact with the real world, but do so in a relatively open-ended way, I think that's when we'll really start to see automation of science at a larger scale. And the goal is to basically get a good target or get something that we expect will help patients in the end. And that takes a lot of trial and error still. So if you can get computers to help with that, then it will be a huge win for everyone.
Great. So we have a moment for any audience questions.
This is so cool. I enjoy hearing about where you guys think the agents will go. I think my question here is where agents are utilizing and automating and connecting the utilization of specialized tools, right? And those tools are being developed independently and then being integrated. We also see that the AI tool, the LLMs, the foundation models are getting better, and they may encompass those tools eventually, right? So do you think the right path is to continue working on integration, or is it still a question of let's see how far at least the frontier models, or even the models being developed internally, will go in terms of integrating? It doesn't even have to be multimodal, just like through natural language or images, integrating all that knowledge, and then at that point you don't need agents at all, right? You just have a single model that will do all of it. Do you think which direction do you think is probably going to yield the biggest benefit in this area?
I can start. I think there's an easy answer, which is that it's not either or. That tools will always be useful to encode domain knowledge in a way that a large language model might not learn in the course of its training. But the other answer, I think there's an aspect of efficiency. So how many multiplications are done when you ask a model to multiply two numbers, right? Trillions, probably. From an efficiency point of view, that seems a little ridiculous. Again, also in terms of interacting with the real world, that is probably also going to be driven by specified, structured software. And that's both in the sort of effector sense, but also in the reading sense. Like, it probably makes sense to still use databases, right? And so I think there's going to be a pull and play. Maybe the models will eat all software, and I think in the limit, that's kind of where we're headed. But I think it really is more of a question of like what makes sense to write using traditional software and what makes sense to kind of seed over to agentic flows.
Yeah, I have to co-sign that. And what I want is the best general purpose model, whatever that may be, Cloud Sign 4.5. And I want to hook that up to kind of my tools that can solve the last mile, that connect to our databases, that know our like really weird way of working, and that can execute those. And there's probably a world in which that gets taken over and gobbled up by just better and better models, but for the near term at least, that's going to be accomplished through attaching tools to very, very good general purpose language models.
In a way, what you're talking about is domain knowledge, like knowledge of your systems, knowledge of your goals, it's all baked into the traditional software.
Yeah. About 5 minutes ago, I just released a blog about this on Dyno Substack. Check it out.
Nice.
Yeah, I totally agree that we always will need tools, no matter how capable is our language model. think of it as the language model is a scientist which has a very deep knowledge. But if that scientist use different tools in the world, it can be a better and better scientist. So I think the good practice is that we always need to start with one single language model and see how it is good in performing the task that we have in mind. And then if it is already good and we don't need to add two, we can go ahead with that single agent. But at some point, if our task is very specialized, we definitely need to integrate some tools. And also, the more that we work on these models, in the future, we will see that these models can write their own tools and act on them. And it's also something that we will see in the future, but even when we have this kind of technology, we still need specialized tools for very specific fields.
Can I just quickly add? I agree with all the comments. I just wanted to add one point. What, for example, I liked about Pranav's work is that you usually think from the fundamentals. You don't have to follow the existing model architecture, paradigms, multicolor things. I think because frontier AI labs have so much resources, and we don't, at least I don't have enough GPUs, it's very hard for us to innovate on the LLM layer. Think about a human can do a lot of things because I don't have to activate my neurons at the same time. I could imagine there can be some fundamental architectural innovations in LLM that may be actually useful, but are not pursued because all the frontier labs are not doing that, and academic labs or other smaller companies doesn't have the resources. So I'd love to see more of that type of work where we think that maybe we can have not just transformer, right? Yeah. Skilled, right? Something very cool, very interesting, and that actually can say perhaps do what Andrews were saying. I do hope that could be an interesting path that generates amazing models, but I still believe there's hopefully one, we're probably a long way there, thankfully, so we can still do tour building at the same time. Thank you.
And the one quick last thing, just to hear your thoughts, is do we need to do this? Meaning, we lose a little humanity. Everything you said was amazing, but then you start saying these are going to automate themselves and going to do all this work. We have, Google DeepMind working on, solving Navier-Stokes, right? And you're like, at what point is this our humanity kind of being taken? I teach students, right, undergrads, and you see their humanity and their thinking leaving. It'll be helpful. We'll be more efficient. But at what point do you think this may be too much?
Just 1 second, we don't have a lot of time. If there's any more questions, we can add it on before we pass it to the panel to finalize their thoughts, wrap it up. Any other questions someone wants to include in Pranam's philosophical? Okay, we'll leave with one small question.
I have a small practical question. Has anyone on the panel seen a useful quantitative framework for agents where they can give you a numerical value representing the amount of confidence they have in the answers that they're giving over the time course of tool calls and returns?
So feel free to answer one or both quickly as we wrap up.
I'm good. Please.
There is work trying to understand confidence scores and calibration between those confidence scores and correctness. I have not seen frameworks that kind of bake that into the outputs of the models. I have seen work where people have essentially asked the model questions and asked how sure they are, and then correlate those sorts of things. I think also this is maybe a deeper answer, but as scientists, I think people essentially act in a Bayesian manner. They have a prior over what they expect, and they do experiments and they update that, right? I think that is a really interesting primitive that LLMs don't use. They're probabilistic, but not in that sense. This is actually an area that I think would be really interesting for tool development, is to build Bayesian inference and have the models write Bayesian, have the LLMs write Bayesian models about what is going on in the world, and then offload that sort of statistical work into the tool. But I've seen a couple papers on that, but nothing at large scale.
Yeah, me neither. I didn't see any specific open source multi-agent system to put these numbers in their output. But from my experience in one other multi-agent system that we worked for building an AI doctor, we actually did that. We asked the model to always output its confidence in the response and in the diagnosis that it makes. And we kind of examined the correlation between the doctor's opinion about that diagnosis and the model's self-confidence. Sometimes they are correlated, sometimes not. So eventually, this is also an auto-evaluation. So sometimes the LLMs don't know that they don't know. And they are not always reliable, even if we have them in the output. It's my takeaway from what I experienced. Yeah. And for your question, I think, no, I don't believe that at some point we will remove human out of the loop and we don't need human. Because as far as you have some specific use case, some data that it's not public, we always need some tools to be able to interpret that, and we need a human to be able to verify that. So it's, yeah.
Every time I worry about that last question, I just go for a long walk in the woods.
Yeah, same here.
All right, I think we're going to break for lunch. So thanks to the panel.